everyone. My name is Felix Rivera. I'm the Educational Coordinator at Aging Advantage. We're a nonprofit in the St. Louis area devoted to improving the care of our seniors and differently abled loved ones. We often work with SLAE, the St. Louis Area Agency on Aging, to make our work possible, and they've graciously funded our video series for family caregivers, where we present different topics and primers with local experts, as well as our own staff, just anything that can aid and encourage those taking care of loved ones. And so today I get to talk to you all about tech. And I realize my face is covering part of the title, but this is Simple Tech for a Simple Life. How we can use our phones and tablets just to make things easier on ourselves, how to make the use of our phones and tablets easier, etc. Before I get in the weeds of this, I want to take a step back and talk a little bit about who I am and why I'm doing this. I don't have any prior background in computer science or engineering. I'm not a techie. I am a nerd, but not for, or at least not prior to, not for computer stuff. I've only recently gotten passionate about tech in the past year or so. But specifically, I've gotten passionate about teaching about tech and learning how potentially easy, sometimes it does take some work, but how much power is really in our everyday devices, our phones, tablets, computers, how with just a little bit of curiosity and a little bit of know-how, we can just make life more comfortable for us, expand what we can do, or at the very least, learn how to do things our own ways, our own means, without necessarily relying on this or that service. Today specifically, though, I want to talk about accessibility options, or how to make phones and tablets more useful to those who might have mobility issues, hearing issues, vision issues, etc. Okay. So this presentation is, of course, geared towards family caregivers, but it's also for care receivers if they're interested in tech. They're interested in making their phones and tablets easier to use. And I hope to, again, build upon this presentation into a series, into maybe specific kinds of projects or how-tos that might be helpful. But this presentation is really geared towards accessibility options and how to make phones and tablets and such more easier for the care receiver to use. And with that in mind, to try to make it as helpful as I can to as broad of an audience, I'm trying to imagine those who might need this advice the most. And so I'm imagining first those who, for one reason or another, are disinterested in learning how to use, quote-unquote, how to use their phone, or in learning about tech, and those who, because of various physical disabilities, hearing issues with dexterity, just aren't interested or can't use their phone or tablet to the most. Especially for family caregivers, my hope, aside from teaching various options and going into tips and tricks, is to nurture curiosity, is to hopefully improve your own life. I hope you leave kind of, just looking into your menus and app stores and trying to find things to fix the little annoyances in life, especially those annoyances that technology usually brings us, even though they're supposed to make things more convenient. And so, as we go through this presentation, there'll be three main parts. First, I'm going to talk about teaching tech, or how to approach talking about technology with seniors, and then I'll go into exploring some really basic features of phones and tablets. And here is really the start of while I do get into specifics, I want to focus on more how to try to think creatively. And so, starting on those basic features that we may know exist but just don't think about, or even things we don't pay attention to that we might somewhere in our brains know are there, but we don't use it, so we don't think about it, but might be extremely beneficial for our loved one. Finally, I'll go into classic accessibility options and specifically what phone companies have surprisingly done, the great advancements they've done to not just make phones and tablets easier to use, but to turn phones and tablets into accessibility tools themselves to make life outside the phone easier. The first point to kind of talking about tech with our elders is avoiding stereotype. I don't think it needs to be said that it's easy to think of older people as simply not wanting to learn about how to use their phones or computers, or even just being stuck in really old ways. So maybe they use a phone or a tablet, but they use it very, we'll charitably say, inefficiently. And in a little I was able to read up, what came up is how much this stereotype specifically, can affect older individuals. And it makes sense. I think most of us have, hopefully in grade school or somewhere, heard about how even hearing about racial bias or a negative racial stereotype even just subconsciously hurts your self-esteem enough that you will tend to do poorly on a test if you hear some sort of negative stereotype about your identity. And likewise, older people, when they are repeatedly told that just tech isn't for them, it's too complicated, or it's beyond them, tend to get more flustered than they would otherwise. And actually, on this point, an example that comes up is my own mother, who, when I was in middle school, I tried teaching her about the internet and how to use it. And so at this point, trying to be careful about dating her or myself, I would say she was probably in her 40s, not far from a senior. But she simply wasn't used to it. She wasn't familiar with computer technology, as many adults weren't in the 90s, or I guess at this point the 2000s. And she, every time, just got so overwhelmed after 5-10 minutes. Actually, I would get frustrated and probably quit. But then now, more than 10 years later, she still uses her phone inefficiently, I'll say. But web browsing, downloading apps, the basics of phone technology. Granted, phones have gotten easier to use, but still, it just took some time. And as the next point goes, finding a purpose. For my mom, simply learning about this thing called the internet wasn't interesting to her. Later on, learning how to take photos, learning how to download apps to talk to her friends and family, and such. That was exciting. That was fun for her. And so, and again, I think this makes sense for most people, but it's a lesson that can easily be overlooked when we're in the moment. So instead of trying to, trying to avoid tropes as well, trying to show an older person how the importance of using a phone or the importance of being careful online. It sounds like a lecture. It sounds like a required workplace, workshop. No one likes those. But if you can frame it as, should probably actually read my notes. Yeah, if you frame it concretely as being easier to do this or that, helping. Now, obviously, this depends on what you're trying to show them. But again, anything that'll make their lives easier, make them feel more independent. Obviously, this depends on your loved one and what they care about. But just treating them like another adult person who doesn't just want to learn useless information. So finding a purpose, finding a reason that'll concretely improve their lives. So this last point is looking for metaphors. And I'm proud to say this is actually something I get to contribute. Just from my own experience learning about computers and software and such, it's amazing how much of the jargon actually has some common sense to it. Not always obvious sense, but there's usually some common sense. Some of it is obvious, like a desktop versus a laptop. Desktop is a computer that sits on your desk, really under a desk, but you interact with it on your desk. Laptop sits on your lap. And if you're millennial like myself or Gen X, Gen Z, a lot of the jargon, web pages, I can't even, of course, when I have to talk, I can't think of them. But a lot of the jargon with computer software, if they're not familiar, then at the very least we don't think about them. We're so comfortable with computers that we don't need to think about the jargon to use them and to be comfortable and familiar with them. And when we recognize that, and we recognize that others, even like my mother, who I think would technically be Gen X, she would be a baby boomer. Anyways, there are other people with very different lives for whom this stuff simply isn't familiar. And rather than simply trying to show them what to do, holding their hands, showing them how to click and such, looking for metaphors to help it all kind of come together, and especially making use of the metaphors some of this jargon kind of provides. So, what am I talking about? Whether you're on a laptop or on a desktop, when you boot up the screen, you'll usually come to actually a page. Oh, it might be too late to add it now. Well, you all know what you come up to. Usually a login screen. You put in a password, and then it brings you to a big background, sometimes a family photo, sometimes some stock image, with some icons, a panel, etc. And maybe you've never thought about it, but there's actually a word for that. It's called the desktop environment. And if you've never thought about it, maybe you just think it's a holdover from when all computers were desktops. But actually, it's called the desktop environment because it was meant to mimic kind of a desktop environment where whenever you open up an application and it comes up in a window, that's supposed to be along the same lines of having a document on your desk. And so if a window is sort of like a book or a pamphlet, then you could try to explain a website as a sort of chapter. And every time you click a link, that's just bringing you to another chapter, another paragraph or part of the book, and etc. And to be clear, you don't have to learn computer science jargon or whatnot, though that might be helpful. But just looking for ways to make using computers make sense. Looking again for metaphors, whether that is seeing this your computer screen or phone screen as a sort of mini desk. Actually, this also is helpful with phones now that I think about it, in that with phones and tablets there usually is a drawer app. You usually slide up and you see all the apps in a series of pages. It's usually called an app drawer. There's something to do with that. Something to do with there. Oh. And so those are just some basic tips on how to think about tech for yourself, but especially when teaching your loved ones and approaching your loved ones who, especially those who may be disinterested, and how to do so respectfully. So next, I want to go and explore some of the features that probably all of our phones have. I won't go through all of them, of course. That could take days. But I want to focus on 3 parts. One, some, again, just basic questions to ask yourself, things to think about. A lot of this is less learning about this feature or that app that might change or might go away next year or tomorrow, but no matter the date, how can you approach technology to make it work for you and your loved one? And so some really basic questions are, what annoys you? And what about when you use your phone, what might your loved one not know? And not simply they don't know how to use a phone, but taking it step by step. Okay, they don't know how to use the phone. What does that mean? They don't know how to unlock a little pattern. They don't know how to use text, click. And with what annoys you, that might sound out of left field. But again, really, often there are things in our lives that tech can't fix everything, but a lot of times it's the little annoyances that tech is really good at fixing or helping out with. Do you have an easy example? Do you have trouble remembering tasks and appointments? Of course, everyone should know that there's always a calendar app of some sort on your phone. There are timers, etc. Are there little things that annoy you about your phone? Chances are that also annoys a whole lot of other people, including programmers who have dedicated quite a bit of time to solving that issue. Not always successfully, and not always maybe in the way that would help you, but just know, if you find something annoying, it probably annoys someone else too. And again, these aren't the only questions, but be curious. And so with the next section, we're actually going to look at some basic features. And this is I was gonna, well, I'll do a preview for the next section. I want to show you, that doesn't help you. Here you go. So these are actually, I have 2 phones connected to my laptop right now, iPhone and Android. Unfortunately, the specific feature I wanted to show is a tablet feature. So I can't show it. Forgot to bring a tablet. Sorry. But again, we're not going through all of them. But what are some of the basic features that we take for granted. For me, one of the inspirations for this series, and this sounds really silly, but realizing that you can add websites to your home screen. This is a feature that has, I think, been on Android and iPhone, iPads for probably a few years. I just learned about it a few months ago, where actually I could still show you on my iPhone, or excuse me, Android. Let's see, I'll just go to this bar here. Now, again, this is a feature, a tablet feature, so I won't actually be able to show you anything, but this will at least guide, a short guide, I guess. Red. Sure. Or this is some random website. Again, doesn't really matter because we can't do this anyways, but oh! I can't. Alright. I didn't think I could do this, but here he goes. And it's because of the specific launcher I have on my phone, it's not going to show up. But if I look in my apps, it comes up. Join Red, and it takes me to that site in that browser. And so now that's just useful. Sorry, we're not going through all the features, but that was really exciting to me, not having to type in all the websites I frequent. There's usually like a good handful on my tablet that I go to for reading various books or comic books and such. Instead of typing it, I just have it up as a button on my home screen, as a sort of a pseudo app. Likewise, on our phones, you can send voice recordings. That's actually another part inspiration for this presentation, is realizing certain features that I always associated with certain apps like Signal or Marco Polo or whatnot. A lot of times, iPhone and stock Android have a version of. And a lot of these little features, again, might not be that helpful for you or me. I personally don't like the idea of sending voice recordings, but maybe that's necessary for a loved one who has mobility issues, and it isn't willing to, or isn't able to type out a text, but doesn't want to start a whole phone conversation. They want to send a quick message that normally would just be a text, but they can't. So they simply send a voice message. And there's a lot of other little tricks like that, making the icons on your screen bigger. As I showed you, changing the launcher. The phone on the, I believe it's on the right, your right. This is an Android. This is not how a lot of Androids look, especially not Samsung phones. This is a unique launcher, which is just an app that changes what launcher is, I guess, the phone equivalent of a desktop. Changes how you interact with phone, and some are specifically made to be more accessible. Anyways. And then finally, and that actually brings us to the kind of the third category of features to explore, those are replacement apps. Again, there are a lot of features that our phones are able to do right out of the box that we maybe take for granted or just overlook. And there's a reason for that. because especially if you have a small phone like this, or even on a giant phone, what we used to be called phablets, but are now just regular sized phones. Oh. Hello, welcome back. I am now in a new location. As you can see, I had to stop recording, go back home. I'm now in my basement. Sorry for the venue change. But if I recall, we were just talking about basic features of our phones and tablets, things we might overlook because they're too niche for us at least, or because we're just don't check because we use other apps for those. And yeah, I think I was trying to show how. Show you all. I think on the right is an Android setup. This I'll show you all later. This is the accessibility menu for Android. A little slow, but you can see I have a fairly large phone here. Now, personally, I kind of like Android. I like this is a nice size phone. The buttons aren't too small, but as you can imagine, they might still be a little small for those not used to phones. Or a big phone like this, just might be hard to hold for someone with dexterity issues in their hands. Maybe they prefer a smaller phone, but then a smaller phone comes, of course, with a smaller screen and smaller buttons. Here on the left is and you can kind of see this is a much smaller phone. The buttons, just by default at least, are a lot smaller. A lot of the features are behind different menus. So if you want to do more than just type or dictate, there you go. You have to press the plus, down. Again, not difficult for, I think, many of us, like quote-unquote able-bodied individuals or people who don't have any difficulty with using their hands. But still, you have to look for it and you have to know it's there. So that brings us to replacement apps. Again, things like Snapchat, WhatsApp, they provide features that our phones and tablets typically can do out of the box, but it's just a much more convenient format. There might be some added functionalities. Snapchat, erases the pictures as soon as right after you see them, and such like that. And these can be good options also for our loved ones. One app that I know was popular and you may have heard of is Marco Polo. Show you here. On the right, Android phone, Marco Polo. It is just a simple video messaging app.
Hi there. Welcome to Marco.
Well, I won't show you the whole thing. It's taken a while for. But all you do is you press this button here in the middle that looks like a camera. It records a short video and you send that to someone who's also logged into Marco Polo. And it provides the convenience of a text, but with obviously with the having with the you can see each other's faces. I think you get the point. You can see each other's faces, hear each other. It's like having a conversation, but without having to make a complete phone call, especially if you don't have the time for that. This isn't an endorsement of Marco Polo per se, but just as an example. As you saw, the buttons are big and bright. The layout is much more intuitive. And likewise, there are apps designed specifically for take a hard left turn. There are apps designed for medication reminders, as well as appointments and calendar apps. Things that, again, most of our tech has some basic version of. But there are apps with better functionality, better layout, that are customized for specific experiences. And because I've done some editing, I don't know if it's still here. I also want to show my phone here. So here on the right, on my Android phone, this is not how a typical Android phone looks, especially not a Samsung phone. It's using what's called the KISS launcher. And a launcher is the phone equivalent of a desktop environment. We don't normally think about phones and their quote-unquote desktop environments because however the phone looks when we get out of the box, we usually keep it that way. We don't know, for that matter, that we can change it. And unfortunately for iPhone, you can. iPhone's pretty restrictive in that way. But if you have an Android, you can change the look and feel of your phone by looking up launchers, alternative launchers, either on the Google Play Store or elsewhere. And this particular launcher is meant to be very minimalistic. It's called KISS, as in keep it simple, stupid. But there are other launchers that might come with more accessibility features, might be more intuitive for your loved one, or for yourself for that matter. And I've been talking about, this is a little preview for the next section actually, but along with replacing basic features of our phones, there are apps that, of course, I think we're all aware of, replace our radio, replace our TV remote, replace how we listen to music. Again, all of us are aware of Spotify or various radio apps and such, but these are other functionalities that our loved ones might appreciate. From talking to my colleagues who have much more experience working with elderly and disabled people, a lot of times if there's an interest in tech, it's in wanting to get their TV to work, wanting to listen to music. And maybe something we overlook is the same kind of joy that we get from using our phones, from seeing our loved ones through video calls, or wasting hours on various videos, leisure. These are things that our loved ones obviously would appreciate because they're people like us. But we think, again, the stereotypes of, tech isn't for older folks, etc., those could get in the way. So that brings me to the last section, which is accessibility. So first off, there are some differences between Android and iPhone. I don't know if Microsoft even makes phones anymore. I don't think they do, so it might not be an issue at all. But generally, there aren't too many differences in accessibility options between them. There, unfortunately, with Android, or good and bad with Android, every vendor, so whether it's a Samsung phone, or even your carrier provider, AT&T, Verizon, etc., they are able to change the layout, add, take away apps, etc. And so certain features, or even just the layout, might be different. That said, all of them have an accessibility menu. Most of them, as far as I can tell, all of them have this. I don't know if you can see, you can't see my cursor, but on the left side of my slide here, I guess you're right. Anyways, you see that little circle with a guy with their hand stretched out. All of them will have that symbol for their menu if you're looking for it, if you're trying to find it through, you know, the app drawer or whatnot. It's not always blue on my Android here because of the unique launcher I have. It's green. They're almost always blue, usually in a circle, guy or stick figure, hand stretched out. Features are usually the same. Some basic features are, you know, increasing the buttons, the size of the buttons and icons, increasing the font, inverting the colors to make them easier to see, to increase the contrast, and also controlling how actions perform. So whether you're talking about phones, tablets, computers, your TV, generally the basic accessibility options are making whatever tech you're using easier to use, easier to navigate. Mention the icon. But what's really helpful about our phones and tablets is, and something I didn't realize until looking into this topic, is how Google and Apple, I usually don't like giving them credit, but I have to give them credit here, where they've found ways to make your phones and tablets accessibility tools themselves. By that I mean they have accessibility options that not only make using phones and tablets easier, but options that make your phones and tablets tools to get around daily life. And so one example, and this isn't necessarily an accessibility option, but going back to what I said above, I heard a lot from my colleagues that sometimes they just, you know, are having issues using their TV. And even if they don't have a smart TV, phones today usually have I shouldn't say they usually have. It's possible to get what's called an IR blaster. It's just a little piece of hardware, usually really cheap. You can connect to your phone. And just like the old-fashioned remotes, and still a lot of TVs today, a lot of remotes, they have a little light. It beams at the TV, changes channel, etc. That's what it is. And there are a lot of apps that make use of that blaster so that it turns your phone into a universal remote. Just wanted to make sure to get that in there. If anyone is looking for a universal remote, or they have one, they're trying to figure it out, phones have kind of made that process a whole lot easier. If you just find the right app, have that IR blaster. That's a sort of accessibility tool, I guess. Just wanted to make sure that was in there. But what's really cool, let me switch over here, is here. I don't know if you can see it. It's not. Okay. I apologize for the pause. I had some technical difficulties. But I was talking about accessibility options and how to use your phone as a tool. So both Android and Apple have much the same features here. They just call them different names. Okay, sorry for the jump there. Having a little bit of technical difficulties with the iPhone. But I wanted to show the magnifier app on the iPhone. Fortunately, and actually this is an important note, the magnifier app is not under accessibility options, even though it is considered an accessibility option or a feature by Apple. And so let me show you then on Android visibility enhancements. Here are some of the features I mentioned: contrast, display, size of font, etc. Okay. So I'm not going to turn it on because at least with the iPhone, turning it on cut the feed from the phone. But both Apple and Android phones have a magnifier app, and they're thankfully both called magnifier, which simply lets you use your camera to identify things in the world around you. And maybe this might sound mundane. It sounds like you're just looking at your camera, but no, using text or voiceover, it actually describes what's going on around. It can identify various objects and give you information about your surroundings. Similarly, there is, if you go here under hearing enhancements, you see again some of the basic features, like, actually let me, actually this is, it's gonna, live transcribe, live caption. They're slightly different. One is specifically for sounds on your phone. I believe on Apple that's called the voiceover, but here, okay, that's live caption. That's what live caption is. Whatever sounds are on your phone, if you're watching a video, you need captions, and they're not provided. Live caption is your phone trying to provide captions for you. And live transcribe, that's what I was looking for. You can be having a conversation, and it will, as you probably saw on the screen, it will transcribe the conversation for you. And so if you have hearing issues, you can hold your phone up and read what the other person is saying. This is what I was looking for. Amplify ambient sound. If you can't read that, amplify the world around you. Hear distant sounds clearly and put the focus on conversations. Okay. So as it makes clear, it's not the feature I was looking for actually, but still, it helps. It's sort of, I guess, like a hearing aid of sorts. Obviously not the same. There is hearing aid support where certain hearing aids, newer ones, can connect to your phone, and you can sort of use it as sort of Bluetooth headphones. And there is, here we go, sound notifications. This simply means you can have your phone on, and when the doorbell rings, when someone is calling your name, an alarm goes off. If you have hearing issues and you normally have trouble hearing these kinds of things, your phone will hear it, and it'll let you know. It'll notify you, assuming you have some way. You're assuming your phone is closer to you for you to hear, or if you have it on vibrate or whatnot. And then you have options like real-time text, which is essentially turning your your voice conversations over the phone, your calls, into a text conversation. So someone on the other end, they don't have to. You both have to be using real-time text, but for them talking, it'll turn their voice into text, and you can text them back if you have issues speaking, or have cognitive issues, and it takes some time, or it's easier to type out. And of course, you can combine this with dictation, so that instead of simply, if you have issues with hand dexterity, you can simply speak, and it'll dictate your text, and it'll send it. And what's real time about this, of course, is, again, it's over the phone, so the person on the other end can see you type. And you can see, as well, if they're also texting, that you can see them type. And so there are a lot of features like this. Let's see if I can. Oh, this is an important one, because this is actually a very old technology and very basic. And perhaps it's my own ignorance. Maybe this isn't more widely known, but you can use your phone with switches. There are third-party devices. Some of them are as simple as a button. Some of them have, or you can use a keyboard, and some of them are a couple buttons, etc. But you can control your phone with what's called a universal switch. You connect it. Here it shows an example of a switch with 2 buttons. And it's just there to, again, if you have hand dexterity issues, or it's hard for whatever reason, a touch screen just isn't your thing, you can use a switch. You can use a third-party device, connect it to your phone, either through a cable or Bluetooth, and control your phone that way. Likewise, it's, as notes here, I don't have it. You can control your phone through your voice, which again builds off of the basic feature of the Google Assistant, which we all know. But using voice access, it provides more basic functionality. Okay, so the last feature I wanted to showcase, I unfortunately cannot find. And it is the ability to, could it be under audio? And I know for a fact this is an Apple. Here's a showcase of some of the Android features I mentioned, but here on Apple. There is the ability to control your phone via facial gestures. So the same way that you can unlock your phone, lock and unlock your phone by pointing the camera at your face, you can also use the camera to control your phone. And I haven't tried it myself, but my understanding is from looking on Apple's site, different you can set certain gestures, certain ways of looking at certain directions to translate to different, say like swipe left, swipe right is, look right, swipe right, look left, swipe left, etc., that kind of thing. And then I've probably covered a lot of notable features already. Customization, though, I skipped over. And that is simply the ability to not only customize the text or colors or whatnot, but control how accessibility options come into play. So I mentioned the magnifier app, the ability to take the camera, point it at something, and it'll give you some sort of text or audio description, whatnot, instead of trying to search for that app every time you need it on the accessibility or the app menu rather, or even instead of having to unlock your phone and press the icon for it, you can simply go to here. And of course, my Apple doesn't want to play nice today. Okay, well, thankfully the same thing works on Android. Here, for Apple, you can actually still see it here where it says side button. Simply controls what the side button does. Oftentimes pressing it, just at least for me, and I think by default, just turns off the screen and locks it. But you can control it, or control what happens if you press the side button with the volume down or with the volume up. You can open different apps. It doesn't have to be an accessibility option at all, just something you use more often. Here on Android, it is under under advanced settings. So you can have an accessibility button where on the bottom of the screen, on top of the back button, home screen button, the show apps button, you can have a special accessibility button, side and volume up keys, volume up and down keys, can control notifications, etc. So I know this was a lot. Seemed like a lot for me. Probably been talking a lot more than what you'll actually hear. So I've been rambling and got to cut this down. But finally, I just want to go through resources because I don't expect you all to remember all of this. I will have here. I just put Google essentially because I didn't want to just give you a random web page address that you'll have to try to remember. I will put the links though underneath this video on Facebook. But if you're curious about any of these features, again, simply look at your own phone. That's probably one of the best ways. That said, there are certain things that are hidden, are difficult to find. As you saw, I mentioned the magnifier app. That is an accessibility option, is built in as an accessibility option, but not actually under accessibility options on my Apple phone. So, and there's other things that might be difficult to understand, even if you're familiar with tech. If you just don't know what the option is, they often don't describe it very well in the menu. Though, as you might have saw, I think Android tends to do a better job of telling you what each option or each feature is. But again, just go to Google or whatever your search engine of choice and put in iPhone accessibility options, Android accessibility options, and they will take you either to the iPhone user guide with under accessibility, or the Android accessibility help page. For iPhone, I know when you click on it, you want to look at the top left page, top left corner. It'll show you what version of iOS you're using. It's the information is for. You want to double check, especially if you're if this is going to be on an older phone that hasn't or can't be updated anymore. You want to make sure it matches that. Some of the features I mentioned might not be available for those older OS versions. So I know that was a lot. Again, I'll leave the links down below on Facebook, and let me know if any of this was helpful, how I could maybe frame this, do better, or what topics you might be interested in, either within accessibility options or beyond. Again, I mentioned some leisure activities like listening to music, videos, and there's a lot you could do with that. There are, and again, beyond just phones and tablets, how to use tech for keeping track of documents and such. But anyways, I'll stop rambling. Have a good day.